Anti-American and pro-Hamas forces hold a giant gathering in Detroit. The president of the United States may be on the outs with India, and India may be making some sort of common cause with China. Plus, we'll get to all the controversy over the Health and Human Services Department. But first, today is the day, folks. My brand new book, Lions and Scavengers, The True Story of America and Her Critics, is out now. It's about the ongoing war between those who cherish our nation and those who seek to undermine it. The question is simple. Will we be lions who build and defend, or scavengers who burn and destroy? Lions and Scavengers is part history and part battle plan. How America became great, why it faltered, how we can continue to rebuild. It's also my most personal book, drawn from years in the fight from testifying before Congress to raising a family in a country under cultural assault, from Rome to Jerusalem to London. Get your copy today at dailywire.com/Ben. We've made it easy. Every retailer is there. Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble. If you want a signed copy, that is only at the Daily Wire shop. So don't wait. Order Lions and Scavengers, The True Story of America and Her Critics right now. And make sure to follow along on my social channels for exclusive behind-the-scenes coverage of the book tour. You're not going to find that anywhere else. Alrighty, so speaking of lions and scavengers, I want to start today with a quote from the book because it is relevant to the fact that there was a giant gathering, apparently, of people who just hate our civilization in Detroit, posing itself as a human rights gathering, of course, but it wasn't, because it rarely is. So, in the book, I discuss various types of scavenger. There are the leeches, people who seek to tear down the institutions of free markets because they believe that they are entitled to the gains of others. There are the lechers, people who believe that the traditional family, the church, they have to be torn asunder because those things are an imposition from the outside. And then there are the barbarians. The barbarians are people who really emanate from places outside the United States, outside the West, and they see themselves as representatives of civilizations that have been laid low by the West. They believe that all of their failures are the fault of Western civilization. So here's what I write in the book. The barbarian is an outsider to Western civilization who believes that all of his own maladies and ills can be laid at the feet of the colonizers of the West. In fact, the barbarian argues, only violence against his purported victimizers can free him of the servile mentality that these very colonizers have instilled in him. The barbarian speaks in the language of mass-murdering communist monster Che Guevara, whose visage still graces the t-shirts of thousands of misbegotten American college students championing the power of hatred. Quote, hatred as an element of struggle, unbending hatred for the enemy, which pushes a human being beyond his natural limitations, making him into an effective, violent, selective, and cold-blooded killing machine. The barbarians never posit a moral justification for how the destruction of the Western order ought to operate at their hands. They never explain just how, for example, a Palestinian state is somehow a burgeoning wellspring of human rights, or how an America without American values would make the world a better place. The only thing that matters is the destruction of the West, for in that destruction lies the supposed reclamation of the barbarian identity. Well, there's a big gathering of the barbarians over in Detroit, Michigan, as I pointed out. There was something called the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit on Friday, and it was attended by a sitting member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib. It was attended by a wide variety of people who talked about the evils of America, the country they were sitting in, how America is an awful place, a place that has given them prosperity, that has given them freedom. And this place is supposedly just awful. All of its core values are evil and terrible and need to be destroyed. Because again, America is a bad place. Western civilization is responsible for all the ills of the rest of the world. And so you saw, for example, a research coordinator at Progressive International named Shashin Padada saying that the very idea of America needed to be destroyed. Remember, this is in Detroit. This is in Detroit. This is in America. If you're wondering why there are so many members of the West right now who are moving toward right-wing parties, it is because those right-wing parties are saying we don't need more of these in our civilization. We don't. Okay, here's Shashin Padada explaining that America is evil and needs to be destroyed. The idea of it needs to be completely wrecked.
I'm reminded of this Bassel al-Araj quote, where he basically says that the average American will never understand the plight of the Palestinian person because the state of Israel is a carbon copy of the United States. And therefore, the thing to do is to destroy the idea of America in Americans' heads so that they can see the humanity of everybody outside of the warping of American exceptionalism and imperialism and all these evil things. We have to dismantle this idea of American exceptionalism, of supremacy, of being beyond reproach.
And then he continued, we live in an evil country, so get out, so you can leave anytime now. Now, remember, the people who are being defended here by this particular research coordinator at the Progressive International, the people being defended here are Hamas. There's not a single speaker at this event who said that Hamas should surrender, go into exile, and disarm, thus ending the war in Gaza and simultaneously the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That is never mentioned by any of these people because, of course, the fault always lies with America. It lies with the West. Obviously, it lies with Israel. Anybody who is successful in the world is apparently supposed to be a repository of exploitation, and anybody who is unsuccessful has been exploited by these great oppressors. This was also put forth by a supposed human rights activist named Huwaida Araf, who, again, essentially argued that America is awful.
We wanted to globalize the Intifada, to expose to the world that Israel's policies have nothing to do with security, that Israel tries to tell the world, and that our government also regurgitate, gaslighting us. We thought that if we could get this message out, the world would wake up and not allow Israel to do this, to do what it's doing. And I must admit, that was a bit of naivete on our part. But we have and we will continue to globalize the Intifada. And we will force our governments to listen to us because they want us to accept a world that is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. You mean unacceptable? But in any case, putting aside the grammar, I think the bigger problem here is the fact that globalize the Intifada is a phrase that calls for widespread violence. That is what Intifada is a violent uprising. Anybody who claims otherwise is lying to you. Again, this is happening on the soil of America. As I talk about in Lions and Scavengers, it's not just that barbarians come from abroad and they enter our gates because we are soft-headed and soft-hearted. It's also that an enormous number of Americans then side with the barbarians because they don't have the confidence in their own civilization. They don't have the belief in their own ideas to actually stand up to this sort of nonsense. See, lions are reflexively self-critical. What I mean by that is that in the West, there is actual moral merit to admitting your mistakes, to exposing yourself to the shame and ridicule of acknowledging guilt. That is something that good people tend to do. Lions tend to do that. Because after all, we live in a civilization, a Judeo-Christian, a biblically based civilization in which repentance is part of life, in which you're supposed to acknowledge your sins so that you can get stronger and get better. The problem is that the barbarians and their allies are not interested in your proclamations of guilt. They're not interested except to use it as a way to destroy you. What they are interested in you shaming yourself. They want you shaming yourself and kneeling before them so they can claim dominance. That's the entire goal. And you can hear, the kind of language that is spread at conferences like the Scavenger Conference over in Detroit. Like the co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide, Dr. Nidal Jabbour, last seen being ushered out of Congress after yelling at Marco Rubio during his confirmation hearings. This is just violent language. He's absolutely calling for the quote-unquote taking out of anyone who opposes his pro-terrorism agenda.
Gaza needs to be saved now. It saved all of us, liberated all of us. It is time for us to pay back and stop the criminals, the perpetrators, the child murderers. And we all know who they are. We all know who they are, whether they are in Israel, Tel Aviv, in Washington, in Germany, in Europe. We all know them. We all know them. They need to be locked up. They need to be taken out. They need to be neutralized to save children, to save children, to save the humanity.
Taken out and neutralized. Again, this is being said in Detroit. In Detroit, it's not being said in Qatar, it's not being said in Gaza. By the way, that idea that Gaza saved all, in what way? And presumably he's talking about, Hamas, because that's what's in Gaza. Already coming up, Rashida Tlaib is a member of Congress who also really, really hates the United States, a lot. Plus, a court strikes down President Trump's tariffs, and India seems to be tilting now toward China. We'll get to all that. First, when was the last time you bragged about your wireless company? Did you know my wireless company gave away 1,000 American flags to deserving vets and forgave $10 million in veteran debt? Did you know my wireless company raised almost $500,000 to prevent veteran suicide? Well, when your wireless company is Pure Talk, There actually is a lot to brag about. You can even brag about the coverage you get with Pure Talk, a 5G network that is insanely fast, dependable, and secure. And you can brag about how much money you save with Pure Talk. Unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of high-speed data is just $35 a month with mobile hotspot. And I use my Pure Talk coverage everywhere, right? I'm not at home right now using Pure Talk, talking with my wife on the phone. I value my calls. You do the same. You should switch over to my wireless company, Pure Talk. But if you need another reason, something you can really brag about, Pure Talk is the only wireless company that gives you a 1-year free membership to Daily Wire Plus when you go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Again, choose a qualifying plan at puretalk.com/Shapiro. Relish your free 1-year membership to Daily Wire Plus. Pure Talk, wireless worth bragging about. Go check them out right now, puretalk.com/Shapiro. Also, let's say that you and a friend are running away from the police and you go on a kind of across the country jaunt. But as you realize that the police are closing in behind you, and you're riding with the top down, and you're near the Grand Canyon, you're like, you know what? I'm going to take this wheel, I'm going to flip it right on over toward the Grand Canyon. Well, as you soar in the air, like Wile E. Coyote, you might think to yourself, man, I should have listened to Shapiro and gotten some life insurance. Policy Genius makes finding life insurance simple, helping you secure real coverage so your loved ones have the financial safety net they need when it matters most. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. It's an easy way to protect the people you love and feel good about the future. Life insurance, really, really important because, you know, what's the one most predictable thing in life? It's dying, and you can actually protect your family from some of the impact of that with life insurance. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace and helps you compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Their team of licensed agents walks you through the entire process, step by step, handling paperwork, advocating for you while clearly laying out all your options, coverage amounts, prices, terms with no guesswork. With thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, Policy Genius has earned customers' trust by helping them find the best policy fit for their needs. Don't wait for a crisis to realize you're unprotected. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro to compare top-rated life insurance policies, get your lowest quote, make a smart move in under 10 minutes. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. Now, this is all culminated in Rashida Tlaib, a sitting congresswoman from Michigan, ripping America and saying, we are in your Congress. Yeah, we know. We know. We understand that the barbarian mentality is quite prevalent in our Congress, actually.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, Ya Jama'ah, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started.
Yes, we understand that you have infiltrated Congress. We understand that. We understand there are a wide variety of people who have decided to stand in solidarity with all of this. And that is what is going to tear down the West, is a West not confronted by the scavengers, but a West that allows the scavengers in, that somehow believes that is an aspect of its own greatness to allow the supremacy of people who wish to destroy its civilization. That is the danger. It's a danger that lies within, and it's a danger that is matched by a danger outside. Speaking of that danger outside, we're at a very tenuous moment internationally right now. Over the weekend, there was a big tete-a-tete between China, Russia, and India, a get-together in which, according to the Wall Street Journal, the leaders of China, Russia, and India held hands at a regional summit and promised to cooperate. A display of unity that aimed in part at President Trump and that underscores the challenges faced by his unorthodox approach to world affairs. There were no major decisions that were adopted at the Tianjin summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was also attended by, wait for it, leaders of Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Belarus, and Central Asian and Caucasus states. Okay, so that is the axis of opposition to the United States. Right? China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Belarus. Belarus is just a stand-in state for Russia. And India. India is the one that matters here. India is the one that matters. The world's most populous country, a rising economic power, strategically placed. I mean, a place that America has been attempting to woo away from its Cold War neutrality and toward a pro-America, anti-Chinese view for the last decade. And it seems though India is now open to swinging the other way. According to the Wall Street Journal, the carefully choreographed imagery of Chinese leader Xi Jinping, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Russian President Vladimir Putin embracing each other sent a powerful message to Washington as President Trump seeks to contain Beijing, to break Russia's bond with China, and to pry India away from Russian oil. This is a major problem. It is a major problem. So, Chinese-Indian relations have been extremely fraught since 2020. Modi traveled to China for the first time in 7 years after President Trump moved to impose 50% tariffs on India, half of them as punishment for New Delhi buying cheap Russian oil, the other half just because we run a trade deficit with India. Those tariffs are actually higher than the tariffs that we have on China. And then President Trump's idiot trade advisor, Peter Navarro, who truly is bad at his job. I mean, really bad at his job. He apparently caused particular outcry by using cased terminology as he said that Indian, quote, Brahmins are profiteering at the expense of the Indian people with the Russia oil trade. By the way, weird take, considering that if you're going to make the case for India, you're going to steel man that case, they get cheap oil from Russia. That's what they do. The people who are mostly going to benefit from that are, in fact, the people at the lower end of the economic spectrum in India. Now, Putin, Xi, drawing India into their orbit would totally shift the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific in a massive, massive way. So the United States has been working on burgeoning relations with India for, again, about the past couple of decades that really accelerated over the course of the last 8 years or so. After there was an Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, you recall, the United States organized something that was called the Quad for disaster relief. That was the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. And to understand what was happening here, you have to look at a map of the region. Maps, very useful. So if you take a look at the map of the region, what you see, of course, is that India is incredibly strategically located. Not only does India border Pakistan, of course, but India also oversees the Bay of Bengal. It is a relatively short trip to the Straits of Malacca, where a huge amount of world trade passes. India has a very long border with China via Tibet. India is relatively closely located to the old Soviet Union, of course, and it was oriented toward the Soviet Union. For those who don't know their history of India, basically, during the Cold War, India declared neutrality but developed very warm relations with the Soviet Union. And then after the Soviet Union fell, there was a lot of turmoil, and then by the mid-2000s, the United States was attempting to really move India toward it. Actually, this goes even back to the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration tried to drive better relations with India. And we'd been pretty successful over the course of the last decade in orienting India away from China because there are border clashes between India and China is also a sponsor state of Pakistan, which, of course, is an Islamic extremist state. We still have a military intelligence relationship with Pakistan, but that's been waning in the aftermath of the Afghanistan war. Now, again, if you look at this map, what you see is not only that India has a gigantic landmass that juts into the Bay of Bengal on one side and the Arabian Sea on the other, but if you look at the Quad, right, I mentioned the Quad a moment ago, that Quad on the map looks like the United States and then India, Australia, Japan. That is ringing China, right? If you wish to restrict Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific, you want strong allies that ring China. And so when you look at the map, what you see is the strong allies that ring China right now amount to India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, right? Those are the big allies that we have in the region. And we've been developing a closer relationship with the Vietnamese government as well. If India flips the other way, it basically isolates both Japan and Australia. It strengthens China radically. Now you have the two most populous countries on planet Earth allied with one another with two rather large nuclear missile arsenals. That is a problem. The United States, again, has been attempting to woo India into a stronger military relationship. And so in 2017, the Quad was strengthened by President Trump on the sidelines of the ASEAN, that would be the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Conference. The goals included things like maritime stability and regional stability and technology and supply chains. And so getting India to be a counterweight to China is actually very much in America's interest. That's why, if you're going to tariff the hell out of China, what you actually want to do is lower the tariffs on India and make India a stronger trade partner with the United States, not a weaker trade partner with the United States. Right now, India is the top military exercise partner of the United States. We do more military exercises with India than we do with NATO. We have been attempting to move, again, India away from Russia, where it has a historic good relationship, and toward the United States. We've been supplying them with better weaponry, for example. As far as the economy, and this is where President Trump's attempts to curb the trade deficit with India those things are pushing India toward China and Russia. Because think of it again from the steel-manned Indian perspective. India receives an enormous amount of oil from Russia, like a lot of oil from Russia. In fact, of India's crude imports, Russia represents 36%. It could be all the way up to 50%, and they're getting at a discount because of the sanctions on Russian oil, which has pushed the price down. Reuters estimates that India has saved something like $17 billion since 2022 by importing Russian crude. In fact, India is the second largest intaker of Russian oil after China. China represents 47% of Russia's crude oil exports. India represents 38%, which means, if you do your math, that 85% of all Russian crude exports are going to China and India. So when the United States slaps India with a gigantic tariff, a tariff higher than China, in order to go after Russia, you have to wonder, is India going to go along with it? And the answer there is probably not. Why? Well, because if that's where they're getting their oil, and it turns out that they have pretty significant trade relations with other countries, right? India is only America's 9th or 10th largest trade partner. We do approximately $212 billion in trade with India in goods and services. India does approximately $128 billion in trade with China. Again, trying to box India in for some reason is likely to lead to them reorienting and trying to counter pressure, especially because they also have access to some of the things that we need, like rare earth minerals. They have access to those things as a counterweight to China. So alienating India because of some sort of trade dispute is bad policy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And you can see that the Chinese and the Russians are ecstatic about all of this. Because again, look at that map. If suddenly, when you look at that map, what you see is a continuous line of support for the anti-American coalition, spanning from China through India and then up to Russia, continuing through Iran, you're starting to look at a pretty solid, consolidated anti-American alliance that is being built right there. India is a key to all of that. That's why what's happening right now is quite dangerous, actually. Already coming up, China and India are making common cause. Also, RFK under fire from a bunch of people claiming that he's perverting the CDC. We'll get to that. First, finding the right hire can drag on for months. You're either waiting for decent candidates to apply, drowning in resumes that don't fit, chasing down people who aren't even looking for jobs. What should be straightforward turns into a frustrating cycle of waiting and sorting. Well, the future of hiring looks much brighter because ZipRecruiter's latest tools and features help speed up finding the right people for your roles, so you save valuable time. Now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. One thing that really stands out about ZipRecruiter is how quickly you can connect with the right people for your team. When you see a candidate that catches your eye, you can unlock their contact information right away instead of waiting around or jumping through hoops. Plus, with over 320,000 new resumes being added every single month, you're constantly getting access to fresh talent, and that means you can fill those open positions much faster than you would expect. Use ZipRecruiter, save time hiring. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within day one. If you head on over to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire right now, you can try it for free. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. Go check them out right now. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Also, I used to assume that restless sleep was inevitable. Night after night, tossing, turning, waking up with that aching back. I'd convinced myself that's how sleep was supposed to be. And then I tried Helix Sleep, and everything changed because it's a mattress made just for me. So as you can see, I'm not, where I normally am for the show. That means that I slept in New York. And, there are a lot of reasons I'm not a huge New York fan, including Zoran Mamdani, but one of the biggest reasons I don't have my Helix Sleep mattress. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress, they match you with the mattress you need for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered. They make it so simple to get your best night's sleep every night. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz and get matched with a custom mattress based on your body type and sleep preferences. Trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. I've got the firm but breathable mattress, means I sleep better at home than I do when I'm on the road. Right now, Helix is still offering that incredible Labor Day sale. Visit helixsleep.com/Ben, get 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. Again, just visit helixsleep.com/Ben for this exclusive offer. Well, according to Walter Russell Mead, this is the whole thing. Trying to box in China, which is not a geopolitical opponent of the United States. It is a geopolitical enemy of the United States. Xi Jinping's regime hates the United States, believes the United States is evil, believes the United States must be defeated. According to the Wall Street Journal, Walter Russell Mead writing, Chinese President Xi Jinping is doing something unusual this week. He's driving Donald Trump off the front page. The story the world is watching isn't Dateline Washington. Instead, Tianjin, China was front and center as Mr. Xi held the largest summit to date of the China-backed Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was a big event. Mr. Putin's presence showed that despite Trump administration attempts to drive wedges between China and its allies, the two Eurasian supergiants are still presenting a united front. The presence of Iran's president, at a time when Germany, Britain, and France are pushing for tightened UN sanctions on the embattled Islamic Republic, underscored Tehran's continued commitment to the cause of resistance. And the presence of Mr. Modi, whose once special relationship with Mr. Trump has become strained, was a hint to Washington not to take India for granted. The meeting was a significant move. Mr. Xi's Tianjin summit highlights what China sees as the limits of Mr. Trump's power. The American president's efforts to drive wedges between Russia and China have so far failed. Mr. Putin is resisting Mr. Trump's mediation over Ukraine, and the Russian leader's presence at the summit reaffirms his strategic choice to align with the East to fight the West. Mr. Trump hasn't given up, says Walter Russell Mead, but China, for now, seems to be outbidding Washington in the Russia auction, and Mr. Xi is rubbing it in. Now, again, it may be that the Russian-Chinese alliance is significantly weaker than America and her allies. But push more populous, growing economies into the orbit of the enemy, and that is a problem. That is not something that you actually want to do. And you can see, obviously, that all the overtures toward Russia have been absolutely useless. I mean, I wish that weren't the case. It just happens to be the case. Over the weekend, according to the Wall Street Journal, Russian President Vladimir Putin expanded his strikes on Ukrainian cities, threatening escalation against Kyiv's backers and pressing for further military gains in defiance of President Trump's deadlines to enter serious peace talks. Kyiv's allies in Europe are coming under increasing pressure too, as Russia intensifies its campaign to demoralize Ukrainians and their backers. Russia this week published exaggerated claims about its gains at the front, demonstrating an underlying insecurity about the speed of its progress in the war, according to certain analysts. But, again, what's happening here is that Russia is getting together with China. They're both trying to get together with India. And the sort of Eurasian dream of moving prominence away from the so-called Atlanticists, that would be America and her European allies, and tipping the balance of power toward China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, because Erdogan has moved Turkey in the direction of China. You know, all this is super problematic. We're moving into a multipolar world. Now, the best way for the United States to fight that multipolar world, as opposed to the hegemonic world that the United States has dominated since the end of World War II, essentially. Yes, there was a USSR bloc, but that bloc was significantly weaker than the United States. And certainly, in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union, it was a unipolar world. The United States was the dominant power on planet Earth by far, no real close competitors. Well, the attempt to put together a bipolar arrangement on the part of America's enemies is really bad. America's greatest weapon in this is to take heretofore neutral countries like India and to draw them in with not only American military power, but also American economic largesse. Free markets are great. Free markets can't turn a communist into a capitalist. They can't turn China into a capitalist country. That was a mistake the United States tried over the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. What it can do is take a country like India that was already tipping toward the United States and draw it closer. And so it makes very little sense to go after countries like India or go after South Korea or go after Japan. These are countries America needs in our orbit, because otherwise the consequences are going to be a significantly fragmented global trading system, a significantly more violent world as all of our opponents seek to move against our allies. That is not a good thing. This is why tariff wars are not, in fact, good and easy to win. They may be against our actual allies. Like, we can cram it down on the Europeans, probably willy-nilly. But even that is not exactly a gigantic win. So, the big story of the weekend is that a federal appellate court on Friday struck down many of President Trump's historic tariffs, saying he unlawfully leaned on emergency powers to impose the import taxes. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not authorize tariffs like the one Trump used the law for earlier this year, according to the Federal Circuit, in an unsigned opinion. It will go to the Supreme Court. The court delayed implementation of its order until October, which gives the Trump administration time to file an appeal with the Supreme Court. President Trump posted late Friday on social media, "All tariffs are still in effect. If these tariffs ever went away, it would be a total disaster for our country." That is not remotely true. If the tariffs went away, the stock market would explode. If the tariffs went away and free trade were back on the table, particularly with our allies, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing, actually. By the way, just going to point out, I said from the very beginning, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is not, in fact, meant to allow the President of the United States to randomly declare tariffs because of trade deficits. That's silly. There was never the emergency power to do this thing. I don't care whether it's a Democrat or whether it's a Republican. The idea of declaring a national emergency every time you want to accomplish something or other is anti-constitution. There are certain things, like, for example, a gigantic wide open border, that are a national emergency. Certain other things are not, like trade deficits. And if we are just going to elect random executive branch dictators who declare emergencies and do what they want, then I wonder why we bother to have a legislature at all in the country at a certain point. Again, these are powers that pre-existed Trump. He's not the one who started this ball rolling, but it is certainly not a good thing that the executive branch should be able to just randomly declare gigantic tariff wars across the entire West without the input of, the elected branch of Congress. Well, meanwhile, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who again is the sort of markets whisperer, he's the person who's been keeping the market floating. He says that, this idea that tariffs are a tax on American consumers is wrong. That is not true.
If they're so bad, and the American consumer's paying them, why do we hear the European companies or the Chinese companies or the Chinese complaining about tariffs if it's all being borne by the American people? It's just not happening.
Well, I mean, that is a terrible argument. The reason that they are complaining is because the costs are in fact borne by the American people, and then the American people start substituting American products, which means that we no longer buy from foreign suppliers. That's the entire purpose of the tariff. So yes, foreign suppliers are going to complain that their more competitive products are barred from the markets, except with a gigantic upward tax. But by the way, I don't even think that the Treasury Secretary believes this. How do I know that? Well, because on Monday, he said that President Trump may grant some exclusions on tariffs for home construction supplies. So he told the Washington Examiner that the president was considering, quote, declaring a housing emergency in the fall. This is great. We can just declare emergencies for everything. Why not? He echoed President Trump's talking point that interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve would help the housing market and suggested that the Trump administration is looking at ways to standardize building and zoning codes and to decrease closing costs for home buyers. And then he also suggested that perhaps there would be some relief on the tariff front. Potential tariff wait, hold up a second. I thought that American consumers and producers were not paying the cost of the tariffs. So if you're seeking to lower home prices by getting rid of tariffs, it seems like you're arguing with yourself. Here is the Treasury Secretary with the Washington Examiner.
We may declare national housing emergency. Oh, wow. Is there a timeline for that, or is it this fall? Okay.
Okay, so again, it's a great way to avoid all of this? Free markets. Free markets are wonderful. And I understand that people, for whatever reason, are not in love with free markets these days, which is bizarre to me, because if you wanted to look at sort of state industrial policy over the course of time, at the very beginning, it looks great. Always. This was true for Japan in the 1980s, for example. Heavily regulated, heavily subsidized, government-involved industries at the very beginning, they look really good and really dynamic. And then, over time, they go bankrupt. And they have real problems. This has been true every time corporatism is tried. Basically, communism is the system that works worst. Second worst is corporatism, and best is free markets. And this is why America, I know everyone wants to rip on the American economy. Oh my God, it's so terrible. It's so unequal. It's so awful to be an American. Okay, I would just like to point out at this point the difference between the Japanese economy, which if you go back to the 1980s, everybody in America was talking about how Japan was going to overcome the United States, how Japan was going to race right past us and take on global economic dominance. And by the 1990s, no one was talking about that anymore. In 1990, the Japanese GDP per capita was approximately, according to our sponsors and friends at Comet, $25,801 is 1990. The U.S. GDP per capita was $23,097. Okay, so actually Japan had a higher per capita GDP in 1990 than the United States. As of 2024, the Japanese GDP per capita was $32,472. The United States GDP per capita was roughly $67,000. Okay, so somebody stalled out. And the reason that somebody stalled out is because capitalism is fan-frickin-tastic, because capitalism is great. Free markets are great. Liquid capital markets are excellent. These are very good things. Innovation, risk-taking, better tax structures, property rights, equal application of the law, non-corporatism. That's great. And so if the United States wishes to dominate the coming century, it should not engage in Japanese corporatism, mercantilism, tariff-based foreign policy. The United States should instead engage in the sort of free trade that allowed us to wildly surpass all of our geopolitical opponents, all of our geopolitical competition over the course of the last 3 decades. It is truly amazing to me that we continue to crap on the greatest engine for generating wealth in the history of humanity in favor of kind of experimental theories about how the economy should work. Roger Lowenstein has a great piece over at the Wall Street Journal titled How and Why U.S. Capitalism is Unlike Any Other. And he says, American capitalism was created by American democracy, wrote Gordon Wood, the Depression-born historian. One can go further. The unique strength of our capitalist system mirrors that of our political ideal. By offering opportunity to all, it fosters vigorous competition. By permitting merit to trump entrenched elites, it motivates individuals with the plum of fortune. Nowhere else is risk-taking so encouraged, and not coincidentally, nowhere else has innovation thrived as it has here. Both law and culture help to shape our capitalism in ways that reflect the spirit of the American Revolution. No taxation was famously a cry of the colonials in Boston. Less remembered is that the Declaration of Independence charged George III with obstructing immigration. To state the most basic fact of political democracy, it permits the popular will to override the establishment, merely another name for what the business professors call creative destruction. So, it is market-centric. American capitalism is highly transactional. It means that risk is both punished and rewarded, and that is a good thing. Because what you actually want is a commerce-based economy that is going to increase innovation, that is going to make Americans across the board wealthier. Doesn't mean that capitalism doesn't have downsides, that everybody benefits equally, but everybody does benefit from capitalism. And this constant attempt to tear away at private property rights, to tear away at capitalism, to say that if only we had a sovereign wealth fund, if only we had a more centralized industrial policy, if only. That way lies economic stagnation, supported by a growing welfare state, which is going to simply eat the American economy alive. If you would like for America to succeed on the geopolitical stage and on the domestic front, then you actually need to unleash the innovative risk-taking capacity of the American people instead of hamstringing it with government regulation, with a bizarre sort of buy fiat government policy. Let the American people cook. Alrighty, coming up, RFK is under fire from former heads of the CDC, among others. Plus, Democrats having a real problem on the crime issue. First, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Producer Jake was in on the action this weekend as the college football season began. He made a few bucks watching Ohio State beat Arch Manning's Texas Longhorns. Prize Picks is the ultimate way to turn your football knowledge into cash this season. With millions of users already on board, this safe and reliable skill-based daily fantasy platform lets you build your lineups in under 60 seconds by selecting more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. Whether you're confident about which players will exceed expectations or which ones might fall short, PrizePicks gives you the opportunity to cash in on your sports expertise. Available in over 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia, it's never been easier to enjoy daily fantasy action while watching your favorite games unfold. Download the app today. Use code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It is good to be right. Go check them out right now. Again, that's PrizePicks. Well, meanwhile, apparently RFK Jr. has fallen under the scrutiny of some 9 former heads of the CDC. And I'd be warmer to this if they had not blown out their own credibility, but they are attacking RFK Jr.'s CDC. Now, again, the CDC came under scrutiny because the head of the CDC just last week was fired, presumably for running up against RFK Jr.'s guidance with regard to COVID vaccinations, because one of the pieces of advice that was going out from the CDC was that the vaccine should not be used for kids or for pregnant women, which, again, I think the data tend to support that judgment. I was saying all along in the pandemic that it was not affecting kids in the same way that it was older adults. And the best case for the vaccines is that for people who are significantly overweight, people who are obese, people who are elderly, that it lowered the death rates for those people. But for people who are 30, it didn't do anything. For people who were 5, it certainly didn't do anything. You know, this idea that it was mandatory for children to take it to go to school was always insipid and insane. So there's now an essay in the New York Times, and it demonstrates why the faith was lost in the CDC. Because there are really 2 questions here. One, is RFK Jr. running the CDC the way it should be run? And two is, how did we get here? And you have to understand one in order to get to the other. So how do we get here? Is the CDC blew out its own credibility? Is RFK Jr. running the CDC the way it ought to be run? I think it's still very much an open question. And I think that what's amazing to me is that these former public health officials aren't focusing in on the seriously questionable activities inside the CDC. For example, the attempt to cut down on research for mRNA vaccines because they didn't like the COVID mRNA vaccine. Okay, you don't shut down entire lines of scientific research because the product of one of those pieces of research done in record time, Operation Warp Speed, was not as successful as it should have been. You don't shut down the entire mRNA vaccine industry, particularly when it comes to research. I'm not talking about retailing it to the public. The research. I mean, the polio vaccine, which is wildly effective. The first attempt at a polio vaccine was actually a failure. People forget this. The first rollout to the American public actually used a tainted polio vaccine, and a bunch of people were injured. It doesn't mean that your kid doesn't get a polio vaccine now. Okay, but in any case, all of this is sort of implicit in this article from these 9 former CDC heads. Quote, "We have each had the honor and privilege of serving as director of the CDC and prevention, either in a permanent or acting capacity dating back to 1977. Collectively, we spent more than 100 years working at the CDC, the world's preeminent public health agency. We served under multiple Republican and Democratic administrations, every president from Carter to Trump, alongside thousands of dedicated staff members who share our commitment to saving lives and improving health. What the Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr., has done to the CDC and to our nation's public health system over the past several months is unlike anything we had ever seen at the agency and unlike anything our country had ever experienced. Mr. Kennedy has fired thousands of federal health workers and severely weakened programs designed to protect Americans from cancer, heart attacks, strokes, lead poisoning, injury, violence, and more." Now, again, the idea that there were no cutbacks to be had inside the CDC is sort of silly. If you're going to make the argument that certain people should not have been fired, you really should name the branch. You really should name the people and the kinds of research that should be funded. He said, amid the largest measles outbreak in the United States in a generation, he's focused on unproven treatments while downplaying vaccines. Well, again, I'm not a fan of this particular move by RFK Jr. Measles vaccines are incredibly effective. MMR is a very effective vaccine. Bobby Kennedy, back in May, directed federal health agencies to explore potential new treatments for measles, including vitamins, which, again, makes very little sense to me. So again, here, I don't think the CDC heads are on sort of the wrong footing. But where they get to the wrong footing is where they say, quote, "He championed federal legislation that will cause millions of people with health insurance through Medicaid to lose their coverage." Okay, now. Okay. So you are now linking together things that actually are a problem, like, for example, directing resources away from measles vaccinations, which are good. And instead, you're now criticizing him for backing a piece of legislation that President Trump was pushing and that you don't like. So you have moved over from the realm of science to the political. And this is how you get Bobby Kennedy as the head of HHS. This is how. And that means people are willing to give him more leeway when he does things that are heterodox on health. So when they attack RFK Jr., again, the sort of attempt to attack him not on the basis of the public health failings, but to attack him on the basis of politics, that's the part that's incredible, and it's self-discrediting. So, for example, you saw that Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was one of the people who was fired, and he resigned, actually. He was the person who was the head of the Mpox campaign under Joe Biden. It was called Mpox because it was originally monkeypox. He said that was actually homophobic. Somehow it created rumors about gay men spreading monkeypox, which, by the way, gay men were spreading monkeypox. I mean, that's just the reality. That doesn't mean every gay man had monkeypox or every gay man was engaging in orgies, but monkeypox was being spread at gay orgies. I mean, that's just the reality of the science. But he was very upset about that. He talked in his parting letter about pregnant people and all the rest of this propagandistic anti-science nonsense. And so what we end up with is lack of trust on all sides. If these scientists simply focused on, the science and not the politics, they would certainly be on better footing. President Trump took what I think is actually quite a reasonable stand on all of this. He put out a statement on Truth Social saying, quote, "It is very important that the drug companies justify the success of their various COVID drugs. Many people think they are a miracle that saved millions of lives. Others disagree. With CDC being ripped apart over this question, I want the answer and I want it now. I have been shown information from Pfizer and others that is extraordinary, but they never seem to show those results to the public. Why not? They go off to the next hunt and let everyone rip themselves apart, including Bobby Kennedy Jr. and CDC, trying to figure out the success or failure of the drug company's COVID work. They show me great numbers and results. They don't seem to be showing them to many others. I want them to show them now to CDC and the public and clear up this mess one way or the other. I hope Operation Warp Speed was as brilliant as many say it was. If not, we'll want to know about it and why. Thank you for your attention to this very important matter, President Donald J. Trump. Well, I mean, first of all, the president should take whatever data Pfizer is providing to him and just release it. If there really is data they're showing him that has not been revealed to the public, he should release it right now so we can have an open investigation about all of this. But the biggest problem when it comes to these medical institutions criticizing Bobby Kennedy or President Trump or whomever else is the leg they don't have to stand on. I mean, literally today, Politico has a piece talking about the American Medical Association and its attacks on RFK Jr. Quote, it's up to AMA leaders, like its new president, Dr. Bobby McCamala, to strike the balance between rebuffing the administration and building relationships within it. On Monday, we might have to say, we disagree. They shouldn't be doing this. On Tuesday, we love this and congratulations, McCamala said. That's what I think the year is going to be like. Now, again, here is the problem. It's that same Dr. Bobby McCamala who we were quoting on the show last week promoting trans medical propaganda fraud. Right? This is the part that's amazing. All these institutions blew out their credibility. That's how you end up with people who they believe are not credible in charge of these institutions. The only way back is honesty and transparency and openness, and I think that's what the president is pushing. But when you condemn the entire institution, the entire administration, I'm not a huge fan of that on any side. Dr. Fauci was bad at his job. He fibbed to the American people at best. He attempted to quash alternative theories on how to deal with the pandemic from people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's now at NIH. But people who said you should never trust anything coming from the CDC, well, I don't see how that's much different from any of these other former CDC heads who are now saying you should never trust anything from the CDC. So, for example, Dr. Paul Offit from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, he says we can no longer trust the CDC.
Where should they be going for easily accessible medical information and guidelines now?
So I think right now the professional societies, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, to get good information about childhood vaccines, or the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology to get good information about vaccines in pregnancy. But right now, I agree with Dr. Frieden. I think that we can no longer trust the CDC. We certainly can no longer trust the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has stocked that committee with people who really aren't experts in the field, don't have expertise, and aren't going to be giving us very good advice.
Okay, if you just throw around expertise as sort of the slang term, as opposed to, actually debunking the individual things coming out of the administration, you're going to end up with nobody trusting anybody, which is basically where we are right now. Okay, meanwhile, when it comes to crime, President Trump continues to succeed. Why? Well, because crime continues to be something that normie Americans worry about. Even Larry Sabato, a pollster from University of Virginia, who does not like President Trump, even he admits that Republicans are going to win this argument over crime.
It's a plus for Trump and Republicans. If you have a sense of history, you already know that because consistently the crime issue, law and order, has been a plus for Republicans since Richard Nixon first put the emphasis on it in 1968 and had a famous TV ad on that subject. Look, elections are about a lot of things. Democrats are not going to win this argument. They never win the argument. In fact, partly because, correctly, they're worried about due process and what's happening to the cities and whether it's improving the situation or not. That isn't a winning argument. They're much better off changing the subject and talking about prices. Nobody ever wants to give up an argument, but sometimes you have to do it.
Okay, so the reality is Democrats are losing this particular argument. Why? Well, because places like Chicago are still seeing a gigantic spate of shootings. According to Breitbart, at least 53 people were shot, 5 of them fatally, as of Monday morning on Labor Day weekend 2025 in Chicago. That is a lot of people getting shot. Meanwhile, you have the Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, the least popular mayor in America, rejecting federal interventions and treating himself as a hero. Here he was over the weekend.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
Wow. I mean, how inspiring. I mean, sure, a lot more people can get shot, but, you know, at least you're resisting. Here he was talking about the necessity of resistance.
This sweeping executive order directs our Department of Law to pursue any and every legal mechanism to hold this administration accountable for violating the rights of Chicagoans. This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will not have our police officers, who are working hard every single day to drive down crime, deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president.
I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous. But, okay, keep going with this, Democrats. See how it works out for you. The left wing of the Democratic Party cannot let go of this for come hell or high water. Ro Khanna, the California congressman, he says, you know, President Trump should let the crime wave continue. He should have run for mayor if he wants to worry about crime. Now, on a sort of general constitutional level, I agree that crime in Chicago is a local problem. On a political level, this is a big loser for Democrats.
We didn't fight a revolution in this country to have militarized streets. And if Donald Trump really wanted to fight crime in cities, he should have run for mayor, not president of the United States. While he's pulling these antics, consumer confidence is down. Manufacturing is down. Farms are closing. The unemployment rate for recent college graduates is spiking to 12%. It's a failed economic record. And all he's doing is trying to militarize our streets.
Now, globally speaking, if the left continues along these lines, they're going to lose. It's a massive problem for them. It's not just in the United States. According to the Wall Street Journal, for the first time, populist or far-right parties are leading in the polls in the UK, France, and Germany, the latest sign of growing voter discontent in much of the continent following years of high immigration and inflation. Far-right and anti-immigration parties have already entered government in countries such as Italy, Finland, and the Netherlands. This year marks the first time they've been ahead in Europe's biggest economies all at the same time. That could provoke a period of political turbulence in all three countries, even if national elections are still likely a few years away. France's anti-immigration national rally has had a consistent lead in polls this year. A poll last month showed Jordan Bardella, the protege of Marine Le Pen, was the most popular with an approval rating of 36%. Polling for the next presidential vote suggests that National Rally's candidate, whether it's Bardella or Le Pen, you remember, Le Pen was barred from running by the European courts for no reason, really, would lead the first round. Now, leading the first round doesn't mean that you end up as the actual president of France. This has happened before, where Le Pen's party has run strong in the first round, then there's a consolidation around the quote-unquote moderate candidate like Emmanuel Macron, and Bardella or Le Pen ends out outside the governing coalition. However, if you keep ignoring the actual anti-immigration demands of your people, you're going to keep getting chipped away at. In the UK, the Reform Party is now basically drinking the milkshake of the Conservatives. It's now comfortably ahead in opinion polls of the ruling Labour Party and the opposition Conservatives. In Germany, Alternative for Germany, AfD, has been neck and neck with the ruling center-right Christian Democratic Union in polls since the start of the year. The AfD has also pulled slightly ahead in recent weeks. And the choice of many of these sort of center-right parties to make common cause with left-wing parties, this is true in France with Emmanuel Macron deciding to basically forge a coalition with the actual communist trash bucket, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. It happened in Germany as well, where the center-right party decided to marginalize AfD and instead move toward the center-left. It's happened in Austria too. The temptation for a lot of these parties is to sort of ignore the demands of the quote-unquote far-right, and then the far-right just continues to grow. As the Wall Street Journal points out, like the U.S., much of Europe has experienced two things at the same time since the pandemic. Record levels of immigration that have caused a voter backlash and a surge in inflation that has now eased but left prices for many goods much higher than before, leaving many voters feeling worse off. Social media has also polarized opinions. Unlike the U.S., much of Europe has almost no economic growth. This is why capitalism is magic. All the Europeans decided to move away from it toward a state-run economy, and it has not worked out particularly well for them. In recent years, both Germany and the UK saw the biggest surges in immigration in their history. In Germany, the share of residents born outside the country surged from just over 15% in 2017 to a record high of 22% in 2024. That compares with about 16% in the United States. Meanwhile, The UK has grappled with a record rise in legal and illegal immigration. Some 4.5 million people arrived legally between 2021 and 2024, primarily from India, Nigeria, and China. That's actually more than people who legally entered the United States. Plus, tens of thousands of people have illegally crossed the British Channel on flimsy boats each year to claim asylum. Even Keir Starmer has had to call it out. So, again, it turns out that the sort of disconnect with reality held by so many at the upper echelons of left-wing politics are leading to serious turmoil in all of these countries. France, particularly, is about to fall into a serious situation governmentally. Apparently, if French Prime Minister François Bayrou loses a September 8th confidence vote on his efforts to rein in the country's budget deficit with 44 billion euros in cuts, he'll become the fourth head of government to lose his job in a year and a half. Massive turnover in the Prime Minister's office. The reason being, France is ungovernable. There's too much support in the National Assembly for the right wing. Left-wing parties don't want any cuts to the French welfare state, according to the Journal. Centrist lawmakers, allied with Bayrou and Macron, want to boost military spending to counter Russia's invasion of Ukraine without raising taxes. Marine Le Pen says the government should cut spending by reducing immigration and payments to the EU. And so France, instead of doing what it should, and siding with Jordan Bardella and Le Pen, they've decided to try and split the baby, and what they're going to end up doing is making the country completely unworkable. So, amazing. But by the way, the actual attempt, apparently, to shrink the deficit is going to involve, from the Prime Minister's office there, eliminating Easter Monday and May 8th, which is when France celebrates the surrender of Nazi Germany to the Allies, which is an absurdity. So, yeah, congrats. You're doing a wonderful job over there in Europe, seriously. And if Democrats continue to imitate their friends in Europe, it's going to go the same way for them as well. Alrighty, folks, the show is continuing for our members right now. We're going to get to Coldplay. You know, there's a reason I always thought Coldplay sucked, and I will explain why. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member and use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.